Okay then. Well, good morning, comrades, and welcome to this LRC online meeting. You're very welcome. I'm Matt Rack. I'm the General Secretary of the Fire Brigade Union and the Chair of the LRC this year. And we have our executive meetings are normally start off with a political discussion, and that's what we're doing here as well. So I'm very pleased to see people turning up to participate in that. We then go on to the more business side of things later on after we've concluded this first session. And we think that the timing of this particular discussion is extremely important. I think the Labour Party is in something of a crisis, if we're frank. Our society is in a crisis. We're facing a disastrous Brexit, whichever happens, whether there is some deal cobbled together or no deal, both are going to be disastrous. It's going to be a Tory Brexit or a Tory no deal Brexit. And their negotiations, from my perspective, they will have been negotiating in the interests of their friends, the billionaire class. They haven't been negotiating in the interests of workers and trade unions. So we face a very stark situation on that front. We also have been through the most alarming year I think that many of us will have ever had in our lives in terms of the COVID pandemic and the impact that that has had on our society and indeed on the world. Hundreds of thousands of people dying across the world as a result of COVID-19. I saw a figure in relation to the United States, for example, yesterday, that there are now more deaths in the United States than combat deaths in World War II for United States forces. That's the scale of the devastation that COVID-19 has caused. And we have, alongside that, significant failures of governments, including our own. My own union has criticised this government from the start in terms of a complete lack of preparation. There were warnings, for example, highlighted in the National Risk Register as long ago as 2008 about the risk of pandemic to society, and yet there has been a complete failure to plan, exacerbated by a decade of austerity. And of course, we'll see the economic impact of COVID playing out in the coming year and immediately in the coming months, but over the next year, as hundreds of thousands of jobs already being lost, unemployment will rise, and we will again face attacks on workers' conditions, public services, wages, and so on. And all these crises unfolding, and we expect the Labour Party to be leading the fight on behalf of workers in this situation. And I have to say, many of us are somewhat frustrated at what's really going on, because I think there is some frustration at the level of challenge to the government over the COVID crisis, over Brexit, over job losses. There has been a series of, I think, unfortunate, to put it politely, abstentions on issues where Labour should be clearly opposing the Tories more clearly. For most obviously thing in terms of trade unionists, I think the Chiz Bill, for example, where many of us have campaigned about undercover policing, and we're following closely the inquiry into undercover policing, and we have Labour abstaining on a bill which would legalise many of the unlawful actions that undercover police officers have taken, including against trade unionists and other campaigners. And of course, the background to that weakness in Parliament is the divisions that we have in our party. We have our former leader, that the LRC proudly supported, and the people on this call proudly supported, Jeremy Corbyn, suspended from the party, then reinstated, but the whip being removed from him. And we have an escalating witch hunt against people on the left, and the suspension of constituency party officers for daring to discuss political issues in their constituency Labour parties. We have high-handed instructions being issued by the new non-elected General Secretary. We have some elements of chaos, frankly, on the National Executive now, and I'm sure Howard and Nadia will perhaps refer to that. So we face a very, very serious situation. And we called this part of the meeting to draw people together so we can get organised, because our message, as we titled the meeting, that we're not going to be silenced. We demand the rights of Labour Party members to discuss politics. We demand the right of affiliates to discuss politics. We think the gains that we made on policy under the years of the Corbyn leadership are frankly under threat, and we need to organise to fight within the movement to ensure that there is no retreat on policy. I think there are certainly many people around the Labour leader who want to see many of those policies rolled back. So I think there's a very important discussion that we're having, and I think that there are similar discussions taking place elsewhere, and we also need to discuss how can we unite the left in these circumstances to defend policy, to defend party democracy, and to defend the rights of individual members. So I think those are the challenges that we face. It's a very serious situation, but equally I think the left is nevertheless, despite the setbacks, in a stronger position it has been many times in the past in the Labour Party. There's never been some golden age where the left dominated the Labour Party. We've always had to battle for socialist ideas in the party. And that's one of the roles that the LRC sets for itself. So that's, I think, setting the scene, hopefully, for a discussion for today. And I'm very, very pleased to welcome to the meeting Howard Beckett, a vocal advocate of left-wing policies from Unite, and also on the Labour National Executive, where I know that Howard plays a key role in defending the left, helping to organise the left against attacks on party democracy and on policy issues. Howard, you're really welcome to address the meeting. Thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, listen, there's a great deal to address, obviously, as you've covered, Matt, and no doubt Nadia will be addressing it in her video, and I'm quite happy to answer questions that anyone may have. If I deal firstly with the issue in respect of Jeremy's suspension, Matt, that you've correctly addressed, because we do have a balance here. We have Jeremy as the person, and then we have the fight for socialism within Labour. And whenever we look at this from Jeremy as the person, I think it's massively important that we are prepared to support Jeremy, because the reality is that we had a man who put himself forward, probably never expected to be in a position of leadership, put himself forward to represent our socialist agenda within Labour, and did so with aplomb. He was a man who fought the right-wing media all through his leadership. I don't think we've ever seen the level of attacks against an individual as we have seen with Jeremy Corbyn. The entire establishment, and whenever I say the establishment, I include obviously elements within the Labour Party, the entire establishment was shaken by the prospect of a socialist government in Number 10, and they, by goodness, did they come together to show us their teeth whenever it came to Jeremy, a man who obviously, as we all know, fought racism all his life, stood on the side of right, stood up against the Iraq War, stood up against apartheid, fought anti-Semitism all his life, and then by the time of the election was portrayed as a racist, an anti-Semite, a spy, even to the extent that we disgracefully had posters on the day of the election saying, "Would you trust this man with your children?" So there is a very important aspect here that we stand beside Jeremy as the individual, because he put himself forward to represent our ideals, and he deserves our support right now whenever he has been challenged, and unjustly so, by those within the Labour Party. But there is also, Matt, as you've referenced, a fight for socialism, and the Labour Party is in an existential crisis right now as to whether or not it goes on the path of socialism. Do we win this fight, or does it revert to neoliberalism and New Labour Mark II? Because that's the direction of travel. As you say, those around Keir Starmer want to move in. And I'll be blunt in respect of this. It's a direction of travel that I feel that Keir Starmer wants to move in, because I am judging him on his record, and every decision that he has made so far is a decision that is one of New Labour and moving Labour back to that neoliberal platform where, frankly, they forget their working class roots and forget the fact that they're there to represent the trade union movement. So I associate Keir with that as much as the people around Keir. And I'll come on in a second to the decisions that he has made. But in reference to Jeremy Corbyn and the individual, I refuse to be downhearted about this. I think that this is a tactic that those around Keir Starmer have chosen to pursue that is mistaken. I think that they will lose, and I think that they will lose this for very good reasons. Firstly, obviously, whenever Jeremy was suspended, there was nothing that Jeremy had done that was against the rules of the Labour Party. Indeed, quite the opposite. The EHRC report, with all of its failings, had upheld the right of freedom of speech whenever it came to discussing the scale of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, and for very good reasons. Obviously, we cannot tackle racism without knowing the scale of that racism within the Labour Party, and obviously it is incumbent on all of us to say to the wider public that there is not a party of 200,000 anti-Semites, but that the problem is a problem that is one that we can tackle. And thirdly, of course, Jeremy as an individual had the right to say what he had done to tackle anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, the improvements that he had made. He had a right to say that Ian McNicol had done nothing to tackle anti-Semitism. He had a right to point the finger at those who in 2017 had worked against the Labour victory. He had a right to say that the right-wing media was attempting to portray him personally as a racist in order to prevent a socialist government getting into number 10. That is political free speech. And there was nothing untoward in respect of that, and it was upheld by the EHRC. And obviously I'm on record previously, and I won't stop saying it, that it is specifically in page 27 of the EHRC report for those who want the pleasure of reading the 129 pages. But the Labour Party obviously did suspend him. It was a political decision that was taken. It was one of interference. It was exactly what the EHRC had said should not happen. It was taken in a fit of pique by Keir Starmer because the day had not gone as he wanted. Angela Rayner was interviewed on the day and confirmed that what Jeremy had said was entirely accurate, but apparently he wasn't supposed to say it on this day, which goes directly to the issue of freedom of speech and directly to the issue as to whether or not we tackle the right-wing narrative, or do we hide in a corner and put a cover over ourselves and say that we have lost this battle, not just for this generation, but for future generations. Obviously, Jeremy did the right thing in respect of coming out. And the NEC panel did the right thing in respect of overturning his suspension. The NEC panel did so with the advice from GLUE. That advice will become public. It is a truism that right now Jeremy's legal team has that advice, but it is legally privileged because it's been disclosed as part of a pre-action disclosure application that Jeremy has made for the Labour Party to have to deliver up public documents to show the bad faith in which the Labour leader is acting, and also to show that there was no political decision in respect of reinstating his membership, but rather it was taken as a consequence of advice that was given by GLUE and also advice that was given as an independent counsel. The Labour Party has refused to release that document publicly, and when delivering it up to the court has delivered it up in the type of font that is hardly legible with watermarks all the way through it, and then have proceeded to try and delay the court date for when that document becomes public knowledge. But it will become public knowledge. It will be out there in the domain in the coming weeks, and people will be able to see that the decision that was taken by the NEC was entirely a proper decision, taken under the guise of the rule books, taken under the guise of advice, and a panel that was not politically weighted to the left, but in fact was reflective of the political dimensions that exist on the NEC right now. And of course, as soon as the membership was reinstated, Keir Starmer took the decision once again to interfere in this process. No doubt there were people down his ear in respect of that, and he took the decision to insist that the whip be withdrawn from Jeremy Corbyn. And here is the essence of the legal argument in respect of that whip being withdrawn. Do the PLP stand as a separate entity to the Labour Party, or is the PLP under the rules of the Labour Party? And of course, all of us on this meeting would say that the PLP is subject to the rules of the Labour Party in the same way as you and I are, Matt. But obviously we have seen through the years that the PLP acts and believes itself to be a separate entity. We saw that with the chicken coup whenever the members of the Parliamentary Labour Party decided that they would oust Jeremy Corbyn as leader, despite the fact that he had been overwhelmingly voted in by the wider membership of the Labour Party. We've seen it repeatedly in respect of the PLP's conduct through Jeremy's time as leader. And those who right now are pointing the finger at the left and saying that we are being the awkward brigade, leaving the NEC, etc., should reflect on the fact that for Jeremy Corbyn's entire leadership, the PLP failed to come behind him and show a unified party because they were as frightened as a socialist government in number 10 as the Tories were of a socialist government in number 10. So we will take no lessons from them. But the courts ultimately will make the decision, is the PLP a separate entity to the rest of the Labour Party? And I am confident that they will make the decision that the PLP is very much under the rules of the Labour Party in the same way as we all are. And those rules of the Labour Party say that the NEC body is the Parliament whenever it comes to a dispute, and you cannot have a second double jeopardy in respect of an individual who has been found to have not breached any rules by way of withdrawing of the whip. It is unprecedented. It is again taken in a fit of pique. It is because, frankly, we at the moment have a leader who is more determined to wrap himself in the clothing of new leadership than he is to wrap himself in the clothing of socialism. So the reality for where this leadership is going is it is making extraordinary short-term decisions premised on following what they feel is polling in regard to disowning the previous leadership of the Labour Party. But in doing so, obviously, are exposing factions within the Labour Party that none of us want to see exposed. Our demand is to see the Labour Party continue to move with a socialist agenda that offers a new deal for workers, talks to our communities, appeals to the wider public, heals society, and of course offers a vision for how we can bring our society out of COVID. And all of that is lacking in respect of the present leadership. So on the one hand, I want to show and everybody the confidence that I have that ultimately Jeremy Corbyn will win his fight. I have an undoubted confidence that those who are being suspended from the Labour Party at the moment will win their fights. And obviously, I, on behalf of Unite, have offered support, and we are trying our level best to bring all of the legal support together. Yesterday, I was on a Zoom with Bindmans and our solicitors for Jeremy to make sure everybody is brought together in respect of offering a home for those who are suspended at the moment. And I've seen the letters of suspension and they are disgraceful. They're lacking in any details whatsoever in regard to why people are suspended. The remits that are going out from David Evans at the moment, in any other walk of life, we would find them to be comedy gold. On the one hand, you say that these are sensitive matters where people will feel that the freedom of speech has been removed. And then on the other hand, you say, but I'm telling you that you cannot discuss them. Where does that finish? At what stage does it come that we cannot discuss the pertinent issues of the day? It's just outrageous that we would think that a socialist party would move in that direction to undermine the importance of freedom of speech. But he will lose on that. And this is the reason as to why it is so short term. I personally believe that these decisions have been taken with a belief that ultimately people will bend the knee, to quote a phrase at the moment, and that Jeremy Corbyn will apologise. Well, he will not apologise. It will not go away. If it has to be finished in a court, then it will be finished in a court. And we will uphold Jeremy's right to have the whip reinstored because he is of Labour, he is an MP, and he is entitled to be a Labour MP. We will overturn the suspensions and we will uphold the important aspect of freedom of speech. And Matt, where does that then take us? Well, you talked about the importance of unifying the left, and it is the reason why I, again, refuse to be downhearted at this moment in time. The left is coming together in a way that all of us who believe in socialism hoped for. It is a truism that whenever New Labour was successful, the voice of the left disappeared, if there was a left, that Tony Blair was able to get on with what he wanted without a unified left coming together. And I see a very different approach right now, and it's why every time I'm asked to speak, I'm pleading with people to stay in the Labour Party, keep your membership. The times will change. Leadership is transient and leadership leaves. The important aspect is where the movement progresses to. Is Labour truly a party of workers? Is it truly a party of social change? We believe that it is, and for that we must stay in and we must fight and we must come together, and we are coming together as a socialist movement right now. As you know, Matt, the 7 left unions are talking about coming together to reassert the values of socialism within the Labour Party, and importantly to reassert the historic link of the trade union movement to the Labour Party. And I think the thing that is really binding us is the failure of this leadership. If this leadership had anything strategic or tactical about them right now, on withdrawing the whip from Keir Starmer and on the suspensions, they would, on the other hand, be showing radical policies that speak for our people in the country. And they would then be making the argument that says, don't look to the past, don't look to Jeremy, don't look to the suspensions. Here we are proposing the answers for the country going forward. But of course, they cannot do that. And they cannot do that because the right of our party offers nothing. They offer a return to New Labour, which failed. The reason why we have had the problem with the red wall seats, the reason why we have seen so many voters leave us, the reason why we lost Scotland, the reason why we lost on Brexit, and the reason why we probably lost Brexit referendum Mark 2 a year ago today is because of New Labour within the Labour Party. It is because those people in the red wall seats have not been listened to. It is because the working communities in Scotland have not been listened to. It is because 1 million manufacturing jobs were lost to those regions that we desperately need during a time of New Labour, and their memories are long, and they do not believe that we are listening to them. And of course, the right wing offer nothing to those communities, whereas Jeremy and us and the left, we offered answers. We offered answers in 2017, and we began to reverse that exodus of people from Labour. We began to give hope to people that we would rebuild our communities, and vitally, we began to give hope to young people that politics and trade unionism and collectivism could change their lives. And obviously, in a period of time, the right wing of the Labour Party and the establishment managed to convince people otherwise by portraying Labour as a party of betrayal in respect of Brexit. But right here and now, it's us, the left, who offer the answers. Labour is quickly becoming a party of abstentionism, quickly becoming one that is recognised, that does not talk about the issue of refugees, does not talk about the Black Lives Matters movement, does not talk about the disgraceful reality of the Chiz Bill, which looks to legalise murder, torture and rape, and also to run a cart and horses through our trade union movement and tear up everything that we have asked for in respect of inquiries in regard to blacklisting, Shrewsbury 24, and so many more. The Labour Party has simply stopped talking for us. Stopped talking for us at a time of COVID crisis when we cannot have a debate about whether or not schools should be reopened. No ifs, no buts. No ifs, no buts means that working class children return to multi-generational occupied homes and carry with them the COVID virus and put at risk working class people. It is our people that have been forced into workplaces to keep the nation going. I've quoted on many occasions, and I'll continue to do, a member of our executive council who works in Sainsbury's who have made extraordinary profits during this crisis, handed a business rates relief by the government while they were handing out over £1 billion in dividends. And she was being forced into work, told by her employer that her work was essential to keep the country fed. And she answered by saying, well, how about giving me enough money so as I can feed my family? And therein lies the truth of what we're facing right now, that we have this choice as to who is going to pay for this crisis. You referenced, Matt, that we are probably looking to taxes to workers. Well, we certainly will be looking for taxes to workers if we have no opposition voice, because right here and now, we face the binary choice as to whether or not wealth tax will pay for this crisis or whether or not workers will be asked to pay for this crisis. And we have seen at the absolute height of this crisis what society expects with their fire and rehire policies, with their diminution of wages, with their extraordinary reality that the minimum wage is not a ceiling beyond which people can go whenever they're furloughed. We have seen that there is an expectancy for people to lose their jobs by the constant delays of the implementation of the furlough scheme. The job retention scheme is becoming in its own fashion a parody because it has not retained any jobs whatsoever. Well, right here now is where we expect the voice of Labour leadership. We expect that voice to be saying there is wealth in our nations and wealth will pay for this crisis, not workers. We expect our leadership to find the strength of those who returned from a Second World War in 1946 and refused to accept what they had faced in 1938 and instead said, park your debt. We want a social state, we want an NHS, and we want our children to go to third tier education because we expect a new deal for those who fought in order to achieve our freedoms. And that's the type of language that we now expect of a Labour leadership, to say very clearly that the working class will not pay for this crisis. There will be others who will pay for it, and it will be those with the extraordinary and ridiculous and frankly hateful wealth that exists for individuals in this society. And it's the reason, Matt, as to why we are being so vocal on the NEC in respect of this. Leadership, as I've said, is transient. It is the morality of our class and our movement that is permanent. We must continue to move towards social justice. We must reject any ideas of our freedom of speech being curtailed. We must talk now about the left policies that will regenerate our country coming out of this crisis. And we must believe that we will win these battles right here and now. Keir Starmer believes that he has all of the cards, a majority on the NEC, he is in leadership, he has surrounded himself with people who agree with him, but in reality, he has nothing, and he will find it out moving towards May, he will find it out moving towards the conference, because the real power that exists in our movement is people on this Zoom today, it is the trade unions, it is the members who will knock on the door, it is the left of our party. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much, Howard, for that introduction to the discussion, and covered a wide range of issues there. I think one thing that strikes me about Brexit, and you made the point very well, and I think it goes to the heart of lots of the issues that we need to discuss, is that the Brexit vote doesn't just happen out of the blue. It's the result of decades of policy decisions, deindustrialization, and a retreat from the decline of trade unionism and the failures of Labour to address some of those issues. And I think that's essential to what we need to discuss. I see there are some chats already about tactics, and we need to address those in the discussion. I'll move on now. I think, Ben, if you're ready to show the video from Nadia, we'll show that, and then we'll open up the discussion. Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Nadia Jarma. Sorry I can't be with you today. So I just wanted to go over a few of the things that that have been happening since the GV5 were elected to the NEC. So we had our induction on the 19th of November, met the General Secretary and his team. But we took the opportunity in that meeting to raise a few questions that members had put to us, particularly in relation to the Labour Muslim Network report, which had provided some damning evidence of Islamophobia within the party. The General Secretary was keen to point out that actually all of the recommendations from that report would be implemented. We also raised the Ford inquiry and how members had felt that that had been put into the long grass. We were told that the report would be available by the end of the year, but there was no clarity around the date of that. So we have written to Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer and asked specifically for a date, an exact date of when that report will be provided, and if there was any plan on how those findings might be implemented. So obviously we'll keep you in the loop on that. We then had the NEC away day, and obviously there's been much written about this online in the media. Obviously for us it was presented as an away day. there was going to be an election of chair and and you know, I think because of the factionalism that we felt from this was an anti-democratic action and an insult to the FBU. Else
Can comrades please mute so we can hear the video?
We raised points of order and made statements and left. There was no abuse and no tirades. Obviously, we have reached out to the new chair and asked if we can have some dedicated space on the new agenda so that we can raise matters that members reach out to us with. We've been inundated, as you can imagine, with motions, with emails from members really unhappy about some of the direction that's been taken. And obviously I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. We also wrote to the new leadership around the Stop the Plane, the Windrush scandal. You'll be aware that there were 50 individuals that were due to be flown out of the country, and 60 MPs had actually opposed this. Unfortunately, our new leadership and the front bench don't partake in round robin letters, so we'd actually asked them if they would personally come out and condemn what was happening. That didn't happen, and obviously we'll discuss that at a future NEC meeting. Thankfully, due to the campaigners and lawyers involved, 37 people were removed from that flight, but you obviously can appreciate that some people were still deported, and we do need to pick that up with the new leadership. We've attended sexual harassment panel training. We had our first Equalities Committee meeting. The vice chairs that we were able to elect were Ella Morrison and Laura McNeil. We have also had the special meeting for the EHRC response. As everybody will be aware, that was a legal response. Sorry, we were legally obligated as a party to respond by the 10th of December, which has happened. I'm not able to go into the full content of what was discussed, obviously legal privilege, but what obviously I just want to point out that nothing has changed. There's been a plan that has gone to the EHRC, and no rule changes have been implemented. Conference still is our sovereign body, and that is something that obviously we've spoken on throughout our campaign during the NEC elections. We've also attended the NEC Development Fund Committee, and obviously we were able to elect Ella Morrison to that, which is great. We made some changes to some of the recommendations, so we've been able to get some more money allocated to members for them to have their meetings more accessible, which is a great result for us. Member surgeries, just to remind people that the member surgeries, we will obviously start to put some dates out in the new year. It's really important. We were very clear that we want to engage regularly with members so that you have the opportunity to ask us questions and raise issues with us that you want us to speak on your behalf in NEC meetings, and as well as giving us the opportunity to feed back to you as well. So yes, just wanted to kind of feed that back. I will ask that my email is shared, so if anyone has any questions that they want to raise with me directly, feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia, for that video. Okay then, again, I think a number of debates emerging in the chat about tactics, about whether it's appropriate to use the courts to challenge the Labour Party on these issues. I think some comments about the whether we're doing enough to challenge what's actually happening, the scale of the attacks on the left that we're witnessing. And I think one thing that we do need to discuss, and I've made this point in a number of meetings I've attended, is we do need an honest assessment of the years of the Corbyn leadership, and there is clearly lots positive to learn from, but there are also, I think, failings that we need to perhaps discuss. Did we go far enough? Should we have been in the position after having such a resounding success to elect the most left-wing leader in Labour's history? We should have taken advantage of that situation to democratise the party, to ensure, because actually a democratic Labour Party would mean that it was a left-wing party, because that's what the Labour Party membership is. And so I think there are issues that we need to discuss about what happened over the past 5 years. We've put Nadia's email into the chat if people do want to email her for questions about the NEC business. And if I could just quickly, again, another area we need to discuss is I think that the elections for the NEC and the negotiations around the CLP slate highlight some of the problems that, frankly, we do continue to face on the left. It was a tortuous process to achieve an agreed left slate. There were all sorts of hiccups, and there were numerous risks that the whole thing could fall apart. Frankly, if we're not able to overcome those difficulties, then we're not going to be able to challenge a very effective and ruthless bureaucracy as it tries to tackle the left. So I think there are lots of issues that need to be discussed in that context. So I'll open the meeting up for discussion, and I'm relying on my helpers to point me in the direction of people who've put their hands up, and I'll invite Pete Firmin in to speak first.
Thanks, Matt. I've been suspended as chair of Hampstead and Kilburn CLP because I allowed the constituency to decide what it should discuss rather than David Evans. But I would point out that not all of the charge sheets being sent round are as short as Howard suggested. Mine stretches to 15 pages. And people need to take on board that they are throwing in the anti-Semitism stuff at the same time as the attack on democracy and what we can discuss. If people haven't picked it up, the announcement that the Tower Hamlets led parties are not allowed to discuss the charity bike ride for Palestine, for instance, shows that overlap and shows that we need to address both, not just what's happening on democracy. I'm concerned that we need to pull this together into a coherent fight back. We've got people saying the fight is not till next year's conference. We've got people putting all the eggs into the basket of legal action. I'm not against legal action, but actually legal action comes down to one person at a time being absolved or whatever let back in. We need a coherent fight back that brings together what's happening on NEC, where we've got the trade unionists and the CLP reps working together on a level that hasn't been seen for an awful long time. We have all those CLPs passing resolutions rather than follow David Evans' rules. And we have that vast number of secretaries and chairs writing in. But that needs to be brought together into a political fight back involving them all. And it's not just, I mean, of course it's all terrible. Of course it's an attack on party democracy. But we need a politically coherent fight back against that. And I think the NEC 14 or whatever it is are best placed to do that. But it does need them to, take it out of the NEC meetings to bring together that movement. So we do resist what's happening to party democracy.
Thanks very much, Pete. And Pete did keep to 3 minutes or so, which has been requested in the chat. So if people could do that, it would be very welcome. Okay, I'll now invite Terry Conway. Terry, you're next.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to Nadia and Howard for kicking off what I think is this important discussion. First of all, I wanted to reiterate what Pete said about the importance of the NEC 14. as a member of Unite and a member of the LRC, I've been frustrated about the way too many sections of the left think that the left and the CLPs and the left and the trade unions should go down separate paths. I've heard stories of even after NEC members, after NEC meetings, the left in those two categories sitting at different tables in the pub. So it was very inspiring to see a united left operating at the NEC away day. But I think it is absolutely right that in the context of this pandemic, in the context of the fact that we were not allowed to have a conference that meant anything this year, when other parts of the Labour movement have managed to have democratic decision-making meetings, members are feeling quite isolated. So I think that's important. I think we also need to take on board the ridiculous nature of the democratic shutdown. The fact that Bath Labour Party have been banned from giving a donation from their funds to food banks throughout the Southwest, the attacks on solidarity with food poverty in our communities has been part of the attack. I think we need model resolutions which are circulated by the NEC 14 that take up these political issues. And we need to challenge the fact that one of David Evans' latest things moves from discussion on anti-Semitism to instrumentalise all anti-racism, all anti-sexism, and suggest that they're going to use the same methodology. We have to be going on the offensive on these questions, and that means we need spaces for coherent strategy that brings together campaigners at the grassroots with those of you that we've elected to represent us. I think we can win this battle, but that needs to involve all of us in the discussion about how to do so. Thank you, comrades.
Thanks, Terry. And I saw the comment about Bath Labour Party in the chat as well, which does seem bureaucracies take all sorts of strange decisions, but that does seem a particularly bizarre ruling, which should be challenged. Okay, I've got Ludi Simpson next.
Just unmuting myself, thanks very much. I just wanted to support things that have been said and to emphasise and exemplify them on the need for coordination. I think that those who have gone first are always particularly heroic and brave, put themselves in the firing line, but there's a real need to do this well, and therefore in a coordinated way. And it is the NEC left it, but it's also, as I think Matt referred to, those who went through the torturous process of producing an NEC left in the first place that must get together. And if they can't, then those that can must find a way around that. But then there's new groupings as well, isn't there? There's all the the chairs and sexes finalists letter who wouldn't all feel themselves as part of those other groupings. So the need to be thinking about bringing those in. I mean, Shipley Branch, who earlier this week passed a motion of no confidence on these issues in Starmer and Evans, but the work to make that happen in a way that so far means nobody's been suspended was invigorating and useful. But it is that coordination that's needed. Maybe that's why there's at least 3 of us from the branch at this meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Harry Stannard, please.
Morning, comrades. Thanks, Matt. Just very briefly then, I certainly agree with Terry Conway's suggestion about model resolutions. In Leicester, where Leicester West passed a resolution calling for the restoration of the whip to Jeremy Corbyn, but where Leicester South lost such a motion, the clear difference there was activity on the ground, careful preparation, and working out precisely what terms the resolution should use and so on. And even though we were able to get our resolution through at Leicester West, which is Liz Kendall's seat, and where Liz Kendall was the only person who spoke against that proposition, the fact is that there's been a big drawback by lots of comrades from activity. There's a lot of confusion about precisely how we go forward at the moment or what we can possibly do. We mustn't lose, we mustn't, keep on going over how shocking the activities of the Labour bureaucracy at headquarters is. The issue now is how we retain the membership, and especially that part of the membership which is supposed to resign. That's what they're supposed to do, and they're supposed to be inactive, they're supposed to be frightened. That's what this is designed for. At the moment, people are disgusted, but that's not going to turn into something positive unless we do so. So model resolutions is fine, but I want to know how it is we work with the National Executive Committee members, Howard and the NEC 14 or however many they were who walked out that day. How are we going to work more constructively, closely and precisely together with the movement within the constituencies, which is still there in favour of the policies that we fought the last two elections on? This is what is in Starmer's and Evans' hair. This is what they're worried about, and this is what they're designed to push from them. I think we're still in the situation, we're right in the middle of this battle. It's not over yet, and some of you will have received notice today by email that David Evans has pulled out of the Labour grassroots Zoom tomorrow, which he had previously agreed to take part in. Now that means that they cannot involve themselves in political discussions. They don't have any policy response other than we're not going to be prepared to fight for the manifesto that the party fought for last December. So people are drawing back. Many people, where they haven't resigned from the Labour Party, have resigned their positions. The largest branch, for example, in my constituency, no longer has a secretary. The constituency no longer has a secretary. Right? All of these are occurring because people are concerned about how precisely they go forward. And I know a lot of comrades in the LRC also attend the Labour grassroots meetings. And I think that's a very important thing because it shows where you get hundreds of people like that regularly coming together on Zoom. It really shows that there's potential there and that many of the traditional organisations of the left are too tangential to it. And we've got to come in and think about how we build this precisely. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. Okay, I'd say I don't know if it's because we're not spotting it. It seems to be a bit of a male-dominated meeting so far. If there are women comrades who haven't indicated or have indicated we haven't seen, please indicate again. Matthew, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Right. Hi, comrades. No, I think this is obviously, as people have said, it's an important point, but I think that, Starmer and Evans do have a politics. The politics they actually have is of supporting Johnson, and that's what Starmer has done. He's effectively sees himself. He effectively sees himself as being, the backing of a national government, and that's what he's done. Throughout the whole pandemic and so on, and through every major piece, he supported the Johnson government, which is, the most reactionary government in British history, and that's the politics. And the background to that, of course, is you appoint Evans, a man who is on record of being against virtually every democratic function of the Labour Party, to clear out the left and to make sure that the Labour Party is entirely controlled, and the left can no longer possibly take control, which is what they want to prevent. I mean, this is clear. Actually, goes back to the whole thing, the chicken coup in 2016. The right clearly were not prepared to tolerate Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party, and they're still not. And this is the point now: is that they're in control. They want to make sure that never happens again, and that's what they're doing. So what we're seeing here is it's a thoroughgoing thing. It's not, there's they're going to go through and make sure that there's no discussion or debate in CLPs that is not on the lines that they want. That there's no discussion at conference, obviously, and they're just going to go the whole thing. So the problem being is what this actually is, in reality, is the unwinding of the whole damn thing. It's actually a split, really, because it's either the question the left, which faces the left really is how does it organise under conditions in which the right, which controls the central machine, will deny all of the mechanisms that have previously been used, resolutions or conference or CLPs or all that sort of stuff. And the key question, as comrades have said, I mean, people are drawing back. I mean, in Scotland it's even worse. I mean, you here, of course, we didn't really have, we had a bit of a surge for Corbyn, but not hugely so. And the Labour Party here has always been pretty right wing, is now getting even worse. And of course, all the people, all the people who came in are either not active or they're leaving. And this is the problem the left has got, is to say, okay, how can you hold the left together, and what is the project? Because as I say, you're now going to be denied the mechanisms that have previously existed, because the party is going to shut them down. Once you have a position in which you have a neoliberal organisation under Starmer, which, as I say, is there to support Johnson, it doesn't have a use for a left, and I actually can't allow a left. So therefore, okay, what is the left going to do now? And this is the real question that confronts us. And I think the key really is the left needs to start organising itself. However, and in terms of sort of trying to hold people together and look at it and say, right, okay, well, this thing is actually going to move into different bits, because they're going to deny us what has previously existed.
Thanks very much, Matthew. And I've just seen in the chat a question directed at me from George Binnett. I saw the comments about the Hackney walk, or whatever it's called, earlier. Excellent idea. And I think the idea of doing some physical protests around, perhaps around NEC meetings, is one that should be explored. I think that's a good suggestion we should be thinking about. Okay, I'll move on to, follow that up, George. Alison McGarry. Alison, if you're there, please.
Myself. Morning, comrades. I hadn't planned to comment, but it's a dearth of sisters today. So a couple of things. One, I'm not as pessimistic. I think all of the points the comrades have made about putting pressure on the NEC reps to deliver, about how do we build a united, politically clear, united front to work together in the party are absolutely paramount. And I think there is that key role for the NEC, for the reps and the trade union reps from that team. But what has happened in our party, and obviously we're Jeremy Corbyn's party, so it is different for us, is that it's actually galvanised and re-energised many of our comrades who were, and especially newer comrades who were talking about leaving the party, had enough, and they've come back to fight. There's a real anger, there's a real energy, there's a real audaciousness of we're not going anywhere. Now, obviously, that is short-term dynamic response, and it won't last unless we organise around that. And we really have to look to that NEC team and the left trade union leaders, because I was involved for many sad hours with the CLGA slate setting. And it was, I mean, not just tedious and a waste of time, but it was absolutely bloodletting by different factions, and particularly by some of the larger organisations that were completely bullying. In the end, we did get that team of candidates, although there were still problems, and I think Anne Henderson did not get elected because of sectarian differences, but I'm not going to go into that, that's being negative. But that's why that NEC team and trade union leaders have to come together. And I think the question about physical action, the comrades have begun to address. There's also the issue, I think, of calling a special conference. You're not going to call conferences. You're not going to call, any form of meeting, which would involve not just party members, not just unions, but also all reaching out to mutual aid organisations, to housing. All of our, not all, many of our active members in Islington North are the bedrock of mutual aid, of housing campaigns, of school governors, of school campaigns, of unions. That's the core of their work. And to bring organisations like that, comrades like that together, I think is paramount. And that's not necessarily, hopefully that's a bridge into the party to reform, but that's also about keeping the left movement going forward and organised and putting it's a pressure tactic, maintaining the pressure. And just one more thing, I mean, because for me, there's a whole discussion to be had about why we lost and why we were defeated. But for me, there were two issues that stand out. One is the lack of engagement directly, I would say, from some of the leadership team with the rank and file, with the community organisations, with the unions, that left a gap. And the other was the complete lack of education within the party and within the movement. And again, that's an opportunity for us at the minute to start to use educational tools and to raise not just the battles in the past, of the losses of the past, but how do we forge a campaign that's going to go forward? And all of this is easy to say, bloody difficult to actually do. And particularly while the left are still so fragmented with people fighting their own corners. A conference next year is far too late. This is about, I would say, the next 3 to 6 months is putting actions into place. Yeah, so I think I'm moving house on Monday, so I'm a bit preoccupied, comrades, but there's my thoughts for now. Anyway, thanks.
Thanks very much, Alison. I've got Adrienne Davis, please.
Hi. Sorry I was late to the meeting, so if I go over old ground that somebody said, I apologise. I agree with a lot of what Alison said. I'm feeling a sense of urgency. The first clampdown on free speech was way back in June, when we were told not to talk about the Panorama settlement. We've gone on and on and on, and the clampdowns have increased. Jeremy's been suspended since the end of October. I'm worried with Christmas coming that it now becomes almost a long-term thing, and the clampdown on free speech suddenly becomes something that they can't actually remember when there wasn't a clampdown on free speech, because we haven't had meetings and the restrictions on meetings have been such. So I feel a desperate sense of urgency. And I think the only people that can bring us together are the trade unions. I run 2 big Facebook groups, and I'm just saying to the members, what are you going to do? And I've written to everybody, I've told Evans exactly what I think of him. And they just put likes on the posts. And I think people are feeling intimidated. The only people that can speak out fully are the trade unions, because we are all hampered within our Labour Party membership. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got Dan Robert. Please, Dan.
Yeah. Just wanted to say that I'm sorry, it's my first ever meeting with the LRC. So yeah, thanks for Steve for inviting me. Enjoyed the discussion, but I just wanted to sort of make a point really to see if anybody thought that. I know as a movement we can sort of walk and chew gum at the same time, but is there a concern that perhaps in the middle of a pandemic we're putting too much focus on internal Labour Party matters? I mean, that would be my previous criticism of Momentum, who were massively important as a young person in sort of like my political education, that perhaps at time there was too much of a focus on internal fighting, and that at a time where we can really be building a movement. I mean, people in Hereford at the minute, where near me in Worcester, Bulmer's looking to sort of do sack and sign contracts, and lots of examples of that sort of thing going around. If we spend too much time sort of having a scrap in a bit of a civil war in such a desperate time for people, we're going to lose out on a lot of people sort of coming into the movement. So that would be my point really. And also that if you look how the far right are working around the world, that they are picking up some of these people that are angry at the state of affairs. They're angry at the way, obviously, what the recovery is going to look like post-COVID. And if we don't work to, as socialists, to sort of bring them into our movement, then sadly some of them will shift towards the far right. So that's just my point really.
Very much, Dan, and yeah, it raises an important point of how do we fight for party democracy and our principles within the party, but without appearing to the people we need to try and organise and work with that we're simply interested in internal matters when there are huge issues facing the class out there. Okay, thanks very much, Dan. I've got Ian Malcolm Walker next. Ian.
Hello. Right. I want to look a little bit further in the future, but not in the sense of kicking the ball into long grass. Things I think we need to start now working for that will come to fruition towards the tail of next year. I think we need to be quite clear. Because there was no conference last year, Evans has not yet been confirmed as General Secretary. We need to build a head of steam to make sure that Conference 2021 does not confirm Evans as our General Secretary. Similarly, we need to take to that conference a motion highly critical, at least, if not motion of no confidence, on Starmer, based on the statement of the NEC 14 and the way the thing was mishandled. We need to call urgently for the full publication of the leaked report. And we also need to, and this is, well, I certainly think we ought to try and get some advice if there's any way we can challenge or reverse the payouts that were made to those traitors that call themselves whistleblowers that weren't. I'm done.
Thanks very much, Ian, and very brief. Thanks very much for that. Okay, I think several comrades have made the point about needing practical. It's all very well us having meetings like this, but we need practical suggestions. I think and we'll go through the chats to bring those together. But suggestions about a protest outside Labour Party headquarters. The idea of planning for conference. I think one of the things we do need, what practically should we focus on in terms of party democratisation that we can take as practical measures to the conference next year. Austin, yeah, I've seen you in the chat. Yes, okay, Austin, yeah, I did call you in, and you weren't around at the time. But I can take you now.
Yeah, sorry, the mute button was jammed. If anybody can hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, everything was jammed on my PC, so sorry about that. Yeah, I'll just very, very brief. I know legal action was mentioned. Now, this was applied in PCS back in 2002 when Mark Sawatka's General Secretary election wasn't recognised by Barry Rimspot on the right wing, and how he used the union machinery to block everything. We had to take them to court, costing us £100,000, but we won the case. The reality is we have a similar party in the Labour Party because it's not just Keir Starmer, the leader, it's the corruption of the Labour Party HQ, the full-time officers in there, they can actually vote in meetings as well, which is disgraceful, and actually stitch up and, to use the expression, cheat. So we have got a massive problem in terms of the Labour Party bureaucracy. Also, they're not very professional in understanding equality legislation, because I put 7 complaints in to Labour Party HQ against members of serious acts of ableism. That's not a joke. I'm discussing this Graham Bash outside the meeting at the moment, but it is a serious issue. It's absolutely outrageous, and they haven't suspended any of them at all. Just a gentle slap on the wrist, just the 3 of them. So I'm saying that there's a case here also for hypocrisy and double standards. I've enclosed the evidence and everything else. So it's the root and branch corruption of the Labour Party HQ we're up against, not just Keir Starmer. Because otherwise, if we had a fair Labour Party HQ who followed the rules and regulations, just like every trade union bureaucracy does, Keir Starmer wouldn't be able to get away with the blue murder he's committing now.
Thanks very much, Austin. Okay, comrades, I can probably fit in another contribution or so if there is, but I don't think there is anyone indicating. Howard, are you there? Do you want to?
Still here, Matt.
Great. Do you want to respond to some of the points raised in the discussion?
Yeah, some really good points, and listen, I'm making some notes, Matt, because I will take it back. Let me just talk briefly about the NEC, if that's okay, mate. The dynamic in the NEC obviously has changed, Matt, as you'll know from Ian's feedback. In Jeremy's tenure, we obviously had the majority, and it's fair to say the NEC was effectively run by Joe Bradley on the left, and it's from Jeremy's office. And it's fair to say, obviously, that the left voted on behalf of Jeremy, and there was a consistency with that. Obviously, Keir Starmer gets elected, and the dynamic changes. The right are obviously in charge. And we need to then regroup and find a strategy reflective of the fact that we're a minority but must have our voice heard. And I think we're finding that strategy. I think we are coming together. The first thing that a number of people have referenced is that it is left v right now. It isn't, the concept is, as Matt will be able to say, the concept of the unions voting in one direction and the CLP reps voting in another direction has gone. It is about the left being unified, and those unions who are on the left voting with the left. That's ourselves, obviously Unite FBU, obviously CWU, Bakers, and it is about getting that left cohort. And what we've been doing is coming together before the NECs, talking about the business that is there, talking about the questions that are to be asked, and then trying to influence the day. Now, we are not naive in respect of where the vote is going to, but we do have a strategy in respect of our communications afterwards and being very vocal. A number of people referenced that it's easier, and it is easier. I accept it is easier. It is easier for trade union officials to speak the truth than it is for others. So we've talked in detail about a communications strategy after each NEC, about going on platforms such as this, Socialist Telly, doing podcasts, having interviews where we talk very clearly about the business within the NEC and refusing to be silenced. I think that's very important. Nadia referenced some aspects that are privileged arising out of the recent discussion on the EHRC. But obviously, and I made this point at the end of the last NEC, that we won't be silenced in respect of the fact that they rejected motions on freedom of speech and rejected an appeal to deliver up submissions that have been made to the EHRC, so as we can understand how the EHRC came to the report they came to, that we won't be silenced. So there is a strategy in place to make sure that after each NEC that we can go out to the membership, talk about what we've said at the NEC, show that there is a fight back going on in the NEC, talk about what's happening in respect of shutdown of freedom of speech, and make sure everybody has confidence that we are speaking on their behalf in the NEC. There is also a strategy that's been put together in respect of model motions that CLPs can pass, and Unite definitely intends to write to David Evans with a list of motions that we are circulating amongst our members who hold officer positions in the CLPs to say that these are the motions that we are saying are legitimate motions, and if he refuses them or tries to lock them down, then he'll be in a battle with Unite, and that battle will take us obviously in a legal direction as well as in a members' direction. But Matt, you hit on it, I think, whenever you said, about protests and where would we be in respect of this. You know, we've had to do things because of the COVID environment. The walkout from the NEC was obviously all around the factionalism in respect of overlooking Ian Murray for the chair of the NEC. I think if we hadn't walked out of that NEC, nobody would have quite understood why we were so upset. Nobody would have really got that, there was a protocol that meant that Ian should take up that chair, and you wouldn't have had a better chair than Ian. So the reality is, as we come out of COVID, we will see the protests starting. I think we would be having protests now outside Southside. I think we'd be having protests regularly outside Keir Starmer's localities if it wasn't for COVID. So Alison referenced the importance of keeping people motivated over the coming months. And, you know, her CLP obviously is very motivated at the moment, but can we keep that going for months? And I believe that we very much can keep that going for months. And if we do keep it going for months, then coming out of COVID, we will see the activity of the left, and we'll see that activity leading up to conference. And I very much hope, Matt, and I'm sure that you agree with me, that whenever we move now towards conference, that we can talk as one left body. That this idea that there's a union bloc and there's then the CLP bloc, that we lose that completely, and that we can talk as one left body in conference and put motions forward that obviously are designed to democratise the party and keep the socialist agenda at the forefront of everything we do. And I think that we can do that. Finally, Matt, somebody referenced the leaked report. Actually, I should reference Dan's comments about infighting. Should we be infighting at this moment in time whenever we need to be offering a message for society? Well, obviously, we shouldn't be. It goes without saying, Dan. But the reason as to why Keir Starmer has created this infight is that he has no solutions for society, certainly no solutions that he wants to voice at this moment in time. And of course, the right wing have never had solutions. So the reason why we're having this fight is not over factionalism or one person. It is over the future direction of the Labour Party. Matt started this off by saying that the Labour Party is at an existential fork in the road. And he is quite right. The Labour Party is now at a place in time where it will either row back to the new Labour days, or it will continue to march in socialism. And that's why we have to have this fight as unhappy as we all are at the fact that it has been placed on the table. Finally, Matt, on the leaked report, the Ford inquiry will not come out before the end of this year. People will reach their own conclusions as to why there has been such a haste with other things, and then the Ford inquiry has been delayed. It won't be concluded, in my view, by the end of this year. It'll be into next year, and it will be an interesting time whenever that Ford report comes out. Will the Labour Party look to overlook what was obviously a concerted attempt to ensure that we didn't win the 2017 election, or will they be honest about the fact that the factions within Southside were working against the leadership and working against a socialist party going into number 10? I hope that they will be honest about that. I fear that they will not want to be honest about that, but I hope that they will be, and I hope that once that Ford report comes out, that will be another moment where the left can galvanise and unify itself together. I don't in any sense dismiss the difficulties of having a unified left. I was involved in the discussions over the slate as well. I don't dismiss those difficulties in getting a left unified, but it is a prize that is worth fighting for. We have to continue to go through these difficult meetings, continue to try and offer a leadership to all of the left, because if we can get a unified left going forward, then I really do believe that sooner rather than later, the party will be back on the track that we need it to be on.
Thanks ever so much, Howard, for your contribution and summing up at the end there, and thanks to all the comrades who've come along. And I think there's a whole, we've got the chat obviously in the LRC, will go through that, lots of suggestions, including lots of practical suggestions. And I think one thing that the LRC has been, one project that we've been involved in through the LRC and also my own union is the network that's developing around the idea, don't leave, organise. That the truth is we in very unusual circumstances, got Jeremy Corbyn elected as Labour leader, and it opened up a fantastic opportunity to discuss, debate and popularise socialist ideas. And we do need to review that and assess what we did right and what we didn't do right. But it drew hundreds of thousands of people into the Labour Party. And despite all the setbacks, that remains the case. And I know lots of people are leaving, and I get the frustration, but it's a struggle, it's a fight. The reason they are witch hunting the left in the Labour Party is because the establishment sees a left-wing Labour Party as a threat. And it does not want a left-wing and socialist Labour Party. And there are forces in society which will do everything possible to undermine the left, and we've seen that played out against Jeremy Corbyn. That's what's fundamentally behind this. They couldn't risk a Corbyn as a prime minister, and they don't want a left-wing Labour Party with socialist policies, or opening up a debate around what we mean by socialist policies. So there is everything to fight for, but we need to do that in a practical way. And I think we need to draw together some of the practical ideas that have been raised here today. We need to consider those, work out what can and will work, and develop a plan of action for the coming year and indeed the next few months. I think the point was made earlier on, the next 2, 3, 4 months are going to be absolutely crucial in this battle. So I think that's what the LRCs, in our way, and the unions and other parts of the left, we need to work together as in a disciplined way. We have disagreements, differences of emphasis, that's inevitable in politics, but we nevertheless need to find where we've got common ground and how we can work together to pursue an agenda that we've all got, which is about a democratic party that defends some of the policy gains that we made over the past 5 years, and how we take that forward, and focusing on a number of issues that might be winnable. So I think that those are the tactical and strategic challenges that we all face in all our roles, whether it's in a trade union, and some also in privileged positions as national officials of trade unions, but right down to people as branch Labour Party secretaries and so on. Everyone has a key role to play in all of this. So thanks again very much to Howard. Thanks to Nadia for sending the video along. I'll call this section of the meeting to a close. We will those on the NEC of the LRC will take a 15-minute break, and we'll reconvene in 15 minutes for the business part of our meeting. But I'd like to thank everyone who attended the meeting. Hopefully you found it useful. You may not have agreed with everything, but hopefully you found some useful points made, and it gives us an opportunity to, most importantly of all, get organised and fight back. So thanks very much. I'll close this part of the meeting. Thank you, comrades.